Oh, William, it's not a game. Westworld Season 2 penultimate episode, Vanishing Point. This is an odd one for me. And I did something that I very rarely do. I slept on it. I'm not recording this right after having seen it. I'm actually not even recording it the morning after. It's been almost a full 24 hours since I've seen that episode, and I'm still not entirely sure what I think of it. And that part of that might have to do with, ultimately, it may depend on how the final episode wraps up. I came into this episode not necessarily knowing what to expect. I was not expecting it to top or even meet last week's episode, because last week's episode was just a phenomenal piece of work that I hadn't even been expecting. So I really tried to make a point of not trying to hold this up to the standard of that previous episode. Unfortunately, the episode kind of begs the comparison because it's doing something very similar. Taking a character that we don't know much about, honestly, in terms of his backstory, and giving us more context, giving us more details, giving us more of their story. And first of all, repeating that for the Man in Black does unfortunately beg the comparison to Kiksuya, the previous episode, even more, which I don't think is a good idea because it doesn't measure up to that. But in addition, this is a character who I'm not sure actually benefits from the additional information that's granted. Now, there's nothing wrong with what we learn about him. It's not a case of like, well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't jibe with what I know. They did it wrong. It's nothing like that. It's just more of a case of, I don't think I learned very much new information about him. Pretty much everything that we see about his life outside the park, I'm not going to go so far as to say, oh, I guessed that. I didn't, but it's all incredibly logical. It all tracks. It's all very, oh yeah, that's pretty much what I would have thought. Yeah, okay, he tries to put on a much nicer face. He has a marriage that is kind of a mess. He, has relationships with people that are weird and awkward. His daughter probably doesn't know him as well as she thinks, in the flashback at least. And all of that, I kind of just shrugged and go, yeah, that's about what I figured. It's not impossible to have information be unsurprising but still have it work. Like the episode that gave us the backstory on Kingpin in the first season of Daredevil, that worked. And on paper, it was doing something similar. I think the difference there was that Kingpin himself as a character was such a mover and shaker that getting a better sense of where he was coming from could give you a better sense of maybe what he was going to do next. I don't think the added context that we got on the Man in Black actually gives us any better of a sense of him than we already had, like, overall as a character. So, like, part of the thing is that he has an interesting dynamic with a number of characters, including his daughter, especially when we're in the up to date, the current time frame, as opposed to the flashback. But I think where it all falls apart for me as an episode and execution is his extended thing, sitting down and talking to what he thinks is his sleeping wife. And on paper, it's not a bad scene. It's actually kind of fitting. He talks when he thinks she's not listening. But he just kind of lays out exactly what we were already seeing, or that was already being indicated, and what was the very logical extension, that the monster he is in the park is the real him. It's not, an act he puts on to let off steam. That's his true nature coming to the forefront. That's I mean, I don't know about anybody else. That's kind of what I've suspected from the beginning. So to have him lay it out in this extended thing, it brought back memories of season 1, but like in a bad way. Because season 1 did a bit more of this, let's sit down and talk about the theme. Let's make the subtext text. And season 2 hasn't done that nearly as much, and I've appreciated season 2 for that. So having it go back on that sort of story, that method of storytelling again, kind of doesn't really work for me. And as far as the other elements at play, his wife, it's not uninteresting, but it's about what I would have expected. His daughter, it's interesting to see the contrast between how she behaved towards him then and how she does now. But the other thing is that him, spoilers, duh, you should know this, him shooting his daughter wasn't surprising. Like, it felt inevitable, but not in a way that, like, I was going, oh God, no, here comes the other shoe. More just like I saw that coming. I think it would have worked better if it had been more sudden. And I don't just mean the moment. He did kind of shoot her in a sudden moment, but given that we watched him shoot all the security guys first, believing them to be hosts, we see it's very clear that he is not in a clear mental state of mind, and so him then shooting his daughter too doesn't come as a big surprise. I think it would have played better if that had been much more sudden, had much less buildup, and then in his standing over the body, starting to talk about, you overplayed your hand, Ford, I saw through this. Having him say it after he shoots her, that could have been like, oh my God, look how far gone he is, as opposed to playing that before the shooting, which just makes the shooting feel like, okay, when are we going to get to it? Because that's clearly what they're building to. So I think they did those in the opposite order that they should have been done in terms of trying to get maximum impact out of that. And I do on paper find his spiraling down to be interesting. He is so obsessed with this game that may or may not actually exist in any real, or at least in the way that he believes it to exist, that he sees everything through that lens. And he is so blinded by filtering everything through how does this fit the game that he does something horrible. And I think that can be really powerful. I just think the way that they chose to execute it doesn't quite get there. And the final moment I'm not really going to judge on, because it's not clear whether he is digging out of his arm like a port like Bernard has, which would indicate that he's a host, or if he's digging around looking for one because he hopes he's a host and not the real thing. We don't get a clear indicator of which is the case there, and that's maybe part of why I'm trying not to be overly judgy about this, because there are things yet to be played out. Moving off of that and getting onto the other stuff, I brought up Bernard, so he works pretty well. I thought it was interesting watching him kind of really fight against Ford, and to see Ford really just so calmly be really certain about what's going to happen. There's always something really because I don't know if I could call Ford a villain, because I still don't really know what his goal or objectives are in this, but he's a disquieting presence, and there's something about a character like that who's just totally calm, and who, no matter what they see, is going, that's what was always going to happen. I did tell you. And there's just something really unsettling about that, and he sells that very well. And I think the segment I liked best, the segment I loved, was Teddy and Dolores. Now, I called fairly early in the season that there was going to be some kind of confrontation between the two of them. I called that they were going to come to blows and that Teddy was going to kill her. Obviously, that's not what happened, but they did basically kind of have a confrontation. So, and I like that. I like when it turns out that I'm half right. So like, I was right that the two of them were going to come to a head, but how it played out from then, I was not right. So I get that validation of, oh, I'm kind of, you know, figuring stuff out, while still getting to have some element of surprise, not being like, yeah, called it. So that's fun for me when it strikes just that balance, the way this one did. And the way that plays out is really good. And I figured where it was going at the point when Teddy says, I'll protect you until I die. And that's when I thought, he's going to kill himself. And the window between when I thought that and when he did it was short enough that it held on to the impact in a way that the man in black shooting his daughter failed to do. And I also really liked Dolores' reaction to that, because initially she's just there, it's like a state of shock, and watching the full realization of what it is that has just happened, that she has just seen, that she caused, to just crash into her. It's really well done. It's a really well put together moment. We only get a little bit of Maeve, but big grin on my face when you can see she's starting to mess with the settings. Oh, she's gonna wreck shop, and I'm gonna be so happy. So, yeah, unfortunately, the big main thrust of this episode is the part that I have the most issues with. But again, even those issues, I do want to stick an asterisk on, because depending on how well the last episode sticks the landing, it might redeem some of this, and it might give more meaning to why it was necessary to show this stuff. Because taken as an episode unto itself, like I said, I didn't feel like I learned much. I didn't feel like what they showed me was as revelatory as the show seemed to think it was. So, you know, that's kind of a shame, but maybe it'll be redeemed in the last episode. Aside from that part, there's a lot of stuff I liked. So, a little bit of a mixed bag, but still good. It didn't totally fall apart. What were your thoughts on the latest episode of Westworld? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Support me on Patreon, baby. I'd love it. There's other stuff to do, such as like and subscribe and follow me on Twitter and buy a t-shirt, etc., etc. Links for all that stuff is down in the description. And until next time, this council is adjourned.